We are delighted to welcome you to this new free virtual summit dedicated to the accounting and finance community. It's been a collaboration project between all four partners, ACCA, Accountex, Generation CFO, and Practice Ignition in response to the global impact of COVID-19. And we would like to extend a huge thank you to the partners and speakers who have supported the summit.
Hello, everyone.
In this session, you'll be able to use the chat function, which you'll find at the bottom of your screen, as well as the Q&A function to ask specific questions to our experts. All the sessions are recorded. If you have a VIP ticket, you can access the recording within 2 to 3 days. And just a reminder that you can upgrade the VIP ticket at any time. 100% of all money raised is being donated to the NHS in the UK. And together we have raised over £39,000. There have been over 15,000 registrations, making this one of the largest online accounting conferences in the world. We'd love to see some social media activity, so we've created the hashtag you can see on your screen, hashtag AF Virtual Summit. So please use that when you post. And here is a message from the partners behind this virtual summit. I'll give you a moment to read. Now onto this session about managing uncertainty, a practical guide to COVID-19 risk assessment, chaired by Mohammed Al-Rubi.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, and thank you very much for your participation today. Today, we're going to discuss a very interesting topic about how a practical guide to COVID-19 risk management. Our panel discussion would be around 45 minutes, includes 3 interesting presentations by our first guest speaker, Anand Soni, the Group CFO for ABB Tools Group in Dubai. He's gonna discuss with us the interacting with the board of directors and ownership during times of crisis, and how understanding their position can make you a proactive and long-tuned CFO. The second part would be with Brian Lapidus, the Director of FP&A Practice at the Association for Financial Professionals. He's gonna share a tool to help senior management understand and prioritize the most significant risks. The last part would be with myself. I'm Mohammed Al-Rubi. I'm the head of FP&A for Middle East Cluster and Takeda Pharmaceuticals. And also I'm gonna share a new tool on how to gather critical inputs to understand the impact of operational leaders in order to build financial resilience. So let's start with our guest speaker, Anand Soni. Let me share my screen.
Hello.
Hi, Anand. Thank you very much for joining us today. Can you give us a quick brief about yourself and your current responsibilities?
So I've been a CFO, Group CFO for the last 10 years, handling diversified businesses. And my single core expertise as a business CFO is to manage the businesses well and from the risk. And the COVID-19 is to navigate through the uncertainties and the risk. So I'm going to share what I believe should be done in the current times, Mohammed.
Okay, Anand, as a CFO handling diversified business in Dubai, do you see a difference in how risks are being assessed in COVID-19 times, managing uncertainties than the pre-COVID-19 times?
Well, as I said, as a business CFO, managing the growth, managing the risk is the top priority. But in the current times, it's an unprecedented times. It's a black swan event. No one was prepared for it. So a lot depends on managing risk and uncertainty on a daily basis. And you can at best take a horizon up to a quarter. A lot depends on which business you are into. As I initially said, businesses make a difference. So what business you are into. But in the current scenario, you can at best plan for today and to ensure that the business is run. So in the current situation, it's the going concern of your business, which is of so importance. Now look back a quarter back, what was happening till February 2020. Yes, as CFOs, we were managing risks. We were managing uncertainties too, but it was absolutely, the risk horizon was probably for a year. Unlike the managing today or for the 3 months, the risk horizon, the managing uncertainties then were from business, not the going concern. Remember, the going concern was never a challenge in the pre-COVID times. And that's a significant difference when I look at managing the risk in the pre-COVID times and the current times. Current, you need to survive, you need to navigate. In earlier times, the risk was more from the strategic perspective. Your going concern of the business was not a challenge, and all depends on what or which business you are into.
And then being aware of that tough situation and having that long experience in managing a big group in Dubai, what do you suggest to our audience today?
See, the challenge here is, as I keep speaking about which business you are into, one of the mistakes which Mohammed and Brian I have seen in my current last 3 months is people mistake a situation for one business with another in the current times, which is a disaster. What works for a trading business will not work for a construction business. And what works for a construction business, mind you, will not work for a contracting business. If we're handling a refinery business, you need to be aware of what is happening on the oil market, plus what is the difference between trading business and a processing business in a refinery business. So you see, the point I'm saying is, the first part, understand a business well. That's the key part. Now let me give you a few examples just to drive you when I keep saying the businesses you're into and the knowledge of the businesses. For example, Mohammed, many times we keep debating internally whether we should have one showroom open, because we do have some trading businesses also. Now, typically in a trading business, you may have retail showrooms, you may have distribution centers, you may have joint ventures. Now, here's the key point. Do you know when you need retail showrooms? Well, if it is B2B, if it is business to business customers, yes, then you need retail showrooms. Typically could be an interior fit out business where you are selling furnitures, you need showrooms. But change the gears, if you have something like food distribution or medicines, where the business is B2C, business to end consumer, their showrooms won't help. You need distribution centers. Now, tell me, Brian, tell me, Mohammed, unless you're in the position to appreciate the difference between a retail, a showroom, and a distribution center, in the current times, you will make a mess of everything by doing a number and arriving at a decision to close a showroom. Let's take another example. In the manufacturing business, the challenge current is the revenue generation. True? And
yeah.
The pricing is a very important element. Now, if you are a business CFO who understands a business, you would go and recommend to your board that, look, though the revenue isn't a challenge, but hang on, you can very well go and work on something which is known as minimum variable pricing model, by which you can recover your variable cost, but you can take a hit on your margins and generate a revenue. Second example of how knowledge of business is important. The third could be cost is another criteria, and each one of us keeps talking, even in current times, you know, I want to bring down my cost. Now, typically in a manufacturing business, the cost of goods sold is an element where we finance leaders always feel short. We always believe nothing can be done at the cost of goods sold. But here's the key point. If you know how the manufacturing process works, you can very well engage in something like cost optimization, substitution of raw materials, and come back even in current times with a solution which is pretty workable at the cost of goods sold level. And when you talk about revenue generation, look at an interior fit out business. The simple value addition by adding something to your factory in an upholstery will give you revenue. So these are a few examples which will make sure that the knowledge of the business helps in current times. One more area, how the knowledge of business, as I keep saying, the business you are into helps also in the current times is in the cash flow and the risk management. Now, let's say if you're having a business of a standard products in a trading business, I think I'm better positioned to manage the cash flow even today, even the uncertainties. Why? Because my product is standard. I have got many clients, and therefore I'm in the position to manage my business well if it is trading of standard items. But if I'm managing a construction business as a property developer, it's a tough time today. It's tougher than what it was quarter back. Why? Because I'm not sure when will the consultant approve my billing. So even in earlier times, handling a construction businesses had a lot of cash flow issues. Even today, it has bigger challenges. So if your business knowledge is up to the mark, even it will help you in managing your cash flow, risk assessment, giving the valid suggestions, a few of them which I explained to you. And that is how I interpret where you're into the business. Yeah, Mohammed.
Anand, let me jump in with a question here. And I was thinking about your response to Mohammed's first question about the risk horizon and how really it's shrunk, and the emphasis on staying a going concern. In your role as a CFO, many times you have had the opportunity to deal with the board, to manage the board and the company of the ownership. What is different about managing the business and managing the board through times of calm and times of storm like we're in now?
I think this is a perfect question, Brian. Thank you for asking me this, because we can keep on debating strategies. We can keep on debating till the time cows come home. But the challenge is, how do you get the job done? How do you get the job done? And that is where, as a business CFO, the strategy, your skills come to manage it. So definitely, it's a tough job. It's a tough call in the current times. So what do we do? How do we manage? First, well, your analysis, your workings, your solutions, you should be thorough now, more than ever in the past. That's one. Two, be a good listener, because I've seen many times the board members have their own view, but if you are interested as a CFO in solutions, you need to be a good listener. Hear them out, go back to them with the solutions. And if you need to change it. This is not an ego space here. It's a question of survival. It's a question of a going concern. So go back, change it if need be. But if you're convinced that what you're saying is making a commercial and a business sense, do put a point, and I'm sure board will accept it. Now, let me give you a few examples which I've seen in the last quarter and how I've handled the situation. You see, many of the initiatives that we have taken in our diversified businesses, we have got 8 businesses, whether it is pertaining to managing a bank structuring a liability, or dealing with receivables, or changing our strategies towards supply chain management, or cost control initiatives, or digital initiatives we brought in to increase the revenue. Now, all these actions, I'm sure we would not have been able to do it in the last 2 months, unless as a CFO, I would have been in the position to convince my board. So the point I'm driving is, we need to understand how critical it is that various actions which you may be contemplating, which you may be thinking are so right, if you're not in the position to discuss with your board, the few of them which I mentioned to you. But there's another angle to the whole thing too, which as a finance leader we shouldn't ignore. You can't manage your board and the ownership well if you don't manage your other external stakeholders. Now, what are those other external stakeholders? It could be your banks, it could be your debtors, it could be your creditors, it could be your colleagues too. It could be your colleagues whom you're working with, right? You need to manage them too. You need to take them on the board. Now, the moment you do that as well, and then you work a solution, go back to the board, tell them, look, what efforts you have made as a CFO, and this is a considered action. Let's say you are negotiating a bank to defer your liabilities. Now it's good to go to the banker, ask his view, see what best your cash flow is permitting, and then go to the board and say, look, I have been in a constant touch with banker. This is my best solution. And trust me, Brian, the board respects it. Once they know that in these times, as a CFO, you have gone ahead, have engaged with all the stakeholders, they really give value to you. And that's the point you have scored what you want the board to accept. The other thing which I have realized works very well with the board is also to give them an indication of what can be the worst case scenario. Howsoever unpleasant it looks like, you need to give the board what can be the worst case scenario and what are the possible solutions. Now, one of the very typical areas where I have seen the board is always obsessed about is the employment cost. They would always expect you to bring down the employment cost. Now, here's my answer to it. I always tell them, work out the cash break-even point to understand what sort of steps you should do, not the normal break-even point. Because a cash break-even point will give you the indication of what sort of cost control measurements you should do. And most of the owners have heard it. Now, specific to a very interesting analogy which you brought in, Brian, calm in the storm. You see, there's a very important part in the current times is the employees, the team members. As a CFO, I will fail in my duties if I don't show empathy to my team members. It's very critical, very, very critical to manage my team so that they are with me. I need to allow them the space. They are all going through stress, listen to them, because they're all important for you to achieve the end results. So frankly speaking, if you ask me today, as I look back, there are three things which I believe are so important as a CFO, regardless wherever you are, whichever part of the world you are into, and whichever business model you're handling. Three are a must for me, and here they go. Point one, a very strong understanding of the commercial and the financial nuances of your businesses. And I don't see there's any let go wherever you are. And if there are holes, better pick it up, brush them, get to it. That's solution one. Point number B, paranoid succeed. We all have heard paranoids do succeed. In current times, there's no harm in being paranoid. Give the board all the solutions, give them the worst case scenario too. And the last, my 4 P's, which I always respect, that is passion, patience, persistence, and perseverance. I think these will take a CFO navigate through these times. Now, this is something I strongly believe. I'm happy to have any other question if you want to ask me.
Thank you very much, Anand, for the great insights, and that's very helpful. Let's move to the second part on how to deal with.
Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you, Brian, for asking me questions and finding my insight useful. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Anand. Very helpful for all of us. Moving to the second part on how to managing uncertainty with senior management, and Brian gonna share with us very interesting tool on how to deal with senior management and how to help them to manage the risk scenarios. Welcome, Brian.
Great, thank you. Happy to be here and to join both of you. Just real quick so you understand a little bit of my background on the next slide. I'm at the AFP. We are a nonprofit association. We help our members in various ways through certifications and conferences. My own background, I've been in and around finance as a practitioner for 20 years at some companies that are large and you've heard of and some that you probably haven't. Specific to risk management and coronavirus, we at AFP have set up a free website. We call it our Coronavirus Resource Center, and you see the link here. The material, the information, the interviews for FP&A, corporate finance, and treasury are all there to help you and to assist you in any way. One more click and you'll see that the tool that I'm about to discuss comes from a guide that we put out a month ago. It's about really the role of finance and financial planning in risk analysis. The guide is free for download, and what I'm going to be talking about on the next few slides is a tool that accompanies the slide. It is there. You might have to register on the website, but it is also free of cost for everybody. And I'm going to just very quickly talk about really the CFO's role in risk. So a thought experiment that is probably going to seem a little obvious. When we make a forecast, right, when we think about what the going concern is going to look like, we have a view, and that's our expected earnings. That's our plan or our forecast for the period. And we recognize that things are going to happen, that all models are wrong, but the goal is to be useful, and we have a view. And things could happen that are better, and things that could happen that are worse, right? This is the reality that everybody in finance lives in. And we have scenarios for what could happen. And on this slide, what you see is really that intersection of risk and finance together. And if something happens now, we're living in a downside scenario, and we have to come up with a new set of expected earnings, right? And there are certain actions that we could take. We might have to limit our growth, limit our capital investment. We might have to consider what happens with our dividend payments, our ability to pay debt and restructure that. So there's a whole set of actions that we can take if things don't happen, or when our model or forecast is incorrect. We also recognize it could be incorrect on the upside, and maybe the antibodies found in that llama are going to work, and we'll be out of this mess sooner than we thought. And so there could be an upside surprise. And then there's certain things and actions that we could take. And this is where the CFO sits. As the steward of capital, being able to help the company think through what could happen for better or for worse, what we could do with our capital. So on the next slide, really, the idea is that the CFO is in the risk game. And depending on your company, this may seem obvious, or it may seem a little bit different. Some companies have chief risk officers. Some have audit as the head of enterprise risk, or maybe it's the general counsel. But the definition of being in finance is trading off risk and opportunity. So we want to think about risk as that uncertainty that could lower the value, that could diminish the potential success of your enterprise. And so your responsibility as a finance professional is to think through, help the company prioritize these risks and these opportunities. And here's the challenge of this, right? Especially for us in the finance community, where we are so quantitative by nature. What we're talking about here is the science of guessing. We're trying to figure out, how do we put a quantitative spin on maybes and what ifs and scenarios and a qualitative discussion. And so to help think through this, just remember that what we start here and in the next 4 steps is an attempt to put that sort of rigor around the thinking. The precision is less important than the trend. Where are you thinking? How are you prioritizing it? And what are you going to do? So in step 1, and this is a tool that's available, so that will be showing on the next few slides. In step 1, you have to think about, for your company, what are the parameters of risk? And we encourage you to think about it in terms of the likelihood that it will happen, the impact, how bad will it be if it does happen, and the velocity of a risk. How quickly will it come and impact and hit your company, and will you have time to respond? So with that, let's first look at likelihood. Now, on the next slide, you'll see the likelihood. This is a template. You should absolutely adapt this to fit your company. But think about it on a 1 to 5 scale, from it rarely happens, or this kinds of thing is unlikely to happen, all the way up to, oh yeah, we think this really will happen. And there's a different percentage of occurrence here. Again, it's adaptable to what makes sense for your company. But the first dimension of risk is, and that you should think about for your company, is, okay, if something were to happen, what are the chances it really would? An asteroid coming and hitting the Earth? Okay, that would be a low likelihood. suddenly we're looking at a pandemic, there's other things that might be more probable. So that would be on the other end of the scale. Now, on the next slide, there's the impact scale. And impact can be measured on really a whole number of different areas. But the question is, if this were to happen, how bad would it be? And there's 5 generic items here that, again, should be adapted. As Anand said, it should be absolutely relevant to your company. So, typically it's the financial impact. What does the customer think? How will this impact your operations and your ability to meet your commitments, your brand, your reputation in the marketplace, and obviously you want to make sure you're in regulatory or compliance. Again, your company will dictate this. But Anand, if you could click one more time, all of these impacts, again, just think about them on a low to high scale, and you can put certain values there, right? What is the dollar value? Now, if you're a $100 billion company, that's going to be a little different than a $100 million company, but the thought process is still the same. Think through, for all of your dimensions, what is the possible impact? And then you want to seize on the highest one, right? And what I mean by that is, if everything comes up with a 3 for the impact, but your brand, maybe it's your brand reputation is significantly damaged, then that's the number you want to go with. What is the magnitude of the impact here? And you could see where I'm going. You're trying to align how likely is it to happen with the impact. On the next slide, there's that third dimension of risk, which is how quickly is it going to happen? And quickly depends on that industry, but is it slow moving like a customer preference? Is it very fast moving like your IT infrastructure is being held as ransomware and or maybe you have some sort of security breach, right? Think about how fast that happens. All right, so we've got the parameters of impact. Let's go to the next slide. And as you think about these things, here's where you get creative. Here's where you sit down with a group, collaboratively, come together and say, what are the big risks that could happen? And I want you to think about these as events. This could happen, this could be bad. And for each of those events, then go through the same process we just went through. If it were to materialize, what's the impact? What's the probability? How quickly would it happen? But I want you to add one more, which is what controls do we have now? And so what we're going to get to is that's the residual risk that exists after you have certain mitigants in place. And do this for all the risks that your company comes up with. And the reason is you have this whole set of risks. And now you want to go to the next slide and say, well, how do I think about these? This is a very simple 2x2 matrix where on the bottom axis, you have the likelihood that it could happen. On the y-axis, you have the impact. And something that's, bottom left corner is less of a concern. You say, all right, we don't have to worry about that, or maybe we don't have to put a lot of resources to that. But if something happens in the top right, it's high impact, high likelihood, you really want to pay attention to that. And then we've added a third dimension with that velocity, how quickly it impacts you. And that's the size of the bullet. And so there, while you see, this fictitious 4 and 6 are at the same, very critical, you see that risk number 6 happens quickly. And so that's what you're going to prioritize as your most significant. And then from there, now you understand how all of these relate to each other. And so on the next slide, you'll see you need a plan to do something. Here is a template. Figure out what you want to do. If this template works for you, that's great. If you want to come up with your own, again, it's about the idea. And the idea is that every risk needs to have an owner, someone who says, I'm responsible for mitigating this or doing something. You want to know what part of the business it's going to impact. You want to know how you're monitoring. What are the early warning triggers? And what are the action plans? And then whoever is in your finance office or your risk office, you want to follow up. Maybe it's quarterly and say, okay, last month you said you were going to do this, or last quarter you were going to do this. Have you done that? Where do you stand now? If we can go to the next slide. I know that I spoke quickly. I think if you click one more time. Right. I know I spoke quickly, so the URL is there, and we could also simply click on the guide. If you do make the donation and to support the British National Health Service, then you can get the replay, and all the other information is here. I'd be happy to chat about this. I could go on for hours, but I do want to make sure that we save time for Mohammed and for other questions at the end. So let me pass the baton back to Mohammed.
Thank you very much, Brian. It's a very interesting tool, and I believe it's very helpful to everyone who want to assess the risk scenarios and help the senior management to make the right decision. Thank you very much, Brian, and thank you also for sharing the link for the great tool. Moving to the last part in our session is the role of finance business partnering in helping our commercial team, support functions to assess the risk. We need to help our team to assess the risk, and we help them to quantify the risk as well. So our role as a finance business partner, not just to get the information from the team without providing insight, without helping the team to quantify the risk. I know all the people in the field have a lot of information, but how to help them to assess it, how to quantify it, that's, I'm going to share with you a very interesting tool, how to quantify and get the insight from our business partner. So let me give you a brief about myself. My name is Mohammed Rubi. I'm head of FP&A for Middle East cluster in Takeda Pharmaceuticals. I have more than 18 years of experience across global multinational companies like Johnson & Johnson, Takeda, Allergan, and Energizer. And I'm a certified CIMA from UK and certified FP&A from US, and also I hold the MBA as well. So what is our role as a finance business partner? How to help our partners to assess the risk, how to get the quantification from them. Based on that, I created a new tool, and I implemented it in global pharmaceutical industry. And I summarized the bucket into 12 areas. The first area is product supply. We have to help our supply chain team to assess the risk, to quantify the risk. So we created 4 main buckets under supply chain area. The first area is the manufacturing side. We have to get insights. What are exactly the manufacturing risk side? So if we have any issue in getting the product on time because of the manufacturing side, if there is any cases in any manufacturing side, how to mitigate it. So this is one of the main area we have to focus on with our supply chain team. The second area is logistics. We have to understand, is there any supply constraint, energy constraints because of COVID-19? Is there flight availability or not? Is there vessel availability or not? So we have to assess our risk also from logistics part. The third part is inventory. There is 2 parts for inventory. The first part is some customers will ask for extra inventory to have a safety stock to manage that risk. On the other hand, we might have out of stock or inventory low level also because of the COVID-19. So we have to assess the inventory from the 2 dimensions. The last part is the customer demand. Do we have any delay in ordering because of COVID-19 from our customers or not? So we need to get full information from our supply chain team to assess the risk from all those 4 buckets. The second part we have to sit with as a business partner with our commercial team. We have to get from them in pharmaceutical industry, for example, what are the key updates by the governmental entities? What are the key requirements by the healthcare authorities? So we have to get all the updates from them regarding any regulation, any new rules regarding to manage the industry inside any country. The second part is the field force availability. As you know that most of our field force availability are not allowed to visit hospitals, are not allowed to visit pharmacies, are not allowed to meet patients. So how to manage that risk? What is the impact in our business because of the field force availability? So we need also to help our commercial team to quantify the impact of not having full-fledged field force team. The third part, which is the patient consumption, or for example, in any other industries like FMCG, what is the consumer consumptions? We have to track it on daily basis to track the consumer assumptions. What are the key factors impacting the consumer consumption? The last one, if we are expecting tenders and awardation, is there any delays or not because of COVID-19? As we know that the commits are not meeting on regular basis because of COVID-19. So we have to expect risk in delaying in getting tenders. Maybe also we have a negotiation with our customers or renewing contracts or implementing new contracts with our customers. Also, we have to assess the risk of delaying in contracts or delaying in having a tender awardation. The last part is the regulatory and the pricing. Registering new products definitely might be impacted because of COVID-19. We might have delay in launches, we might have delay in introducing new products to the market. So we have to assess that from that perspective. Pricing as well, especially in the pharmaceutical industry, pricing is very sensitive, and the healthcare authorities usually on a regular basis, they are assessing the price. So are we expecting delay in getting price reduction or referencing in price or not? New launches, because of delay in registering our product, we have to evaluate the impact of having delay in our new launches. Also, we don't have full tool to make a commercial campaign or new product campaign. So we might also have a delay in commercial launch. So we have to also to evaluate the impact of new launch. And the last part also of legalization and documentation, because most of the governmental offices are not open in the regular time. So also we have to assess the risk from that impact. So the outcomes from those 12 buckets will definitely impact our financial, even the P&L or in our cash flow. So our role as a business partner is to sit with each function to get and assess the risk on a regular basis. So we created a checklist to help also our commercial team to assess the risk. So we shared with them a very good checking list to help them to quantify the risk. For example, we shared, for example, if you have to manage or to assess the patient consumption or the in-market sales consumption, they have to ask themselves this question: is it a critical disease or not? Are patients allowed to visit hospitals or not? So we shared with them very good checklist, which will help them to quantify and assess the risk from different dimensions. Also, we create another checklist for supply chain team about any expectation of delay because of manufacturing site, flight availability, any delay in product, is there any risk of out of stock or not? So this kind of checklist helps our functions to get the proper insight to and assess the risk. And the same also for regulatory and price. So once we shared with our functions as a business partner that checklist, we created one consolidated template or tool to consolidate all the input from all functions. And based on that, we can have a full visibility of our COVID-19 risk. And that helps the team to quantify it. And also, we added one important column, which is the mitigation plan. And we asked functions to share with each other what is the mitigation plan. We might have a best practice in one country, could be shared with the other countries as a mitigation plan. So once you have a full-fledged, comprehensive tool having all the impact from COVID-19 and reviewing it with your business partners on weekly basis, it gives a very good heads up to management what is exactly the quantified risk, what is the probability of it, and also what is the mitigation plans, and we have to agree with them on the action plan. In our organization, we agreed to have it on a weekly basis, so we ask our functions and our business partners to update it on weekly basis, and that helped us big time to manage our risk and be on the top of COVID-19 risk and on the mitigation plan. That's all from my side, and we have now the Q&A session. If anyone of you have questions for me or Brian or Anand, and thank you very much for your participation.
Mohammed, while we wait for questions to come in, something you said made me think about a commonality between really all of us. You had said that you were updating the plans on a weekly basis with your partners. And Anand, how often were you talking to boards and to the ownership of your company during a crisis?
Should I
Yeah,
first?
that's very.
Yeah, I think, Brian, just to, I'm probably interacting every day because specific to us, we have got about 7 to 8 businesses. Uh, some are some big size, some are small. So yes, my interactions as a CFO with the board is practically every day.
Yeah, and I think that's certainly one common feature is the cycle of conversations of gathering information is so much more accelerated. And for finance, we talk about the need to be a partner to the business, a partner to everybody else. That communication is just more important now than at any other time, and that really has come through in all the things that we've said. The other thing that I was thinking, Mohammed, during your part, was that sense of knowing what you know and being humble about what you don't know. And in your communications, you really emphasized going out and saying, and finding out what we don't know, and updating that. And on your end, and where in my area as well, talking to senior leadership, that honesty about what you don't know is so important for reality, because that's the output, that's what we're living with. It's so important because when we do present some sort of forecast or some sort of numbers, they're not going to be right. And if we don't communicate the assumptions, if we don't communicate the difficulty of making forecast now, then someone's going to come back to us and say, well, how come your forecast was wrong? How come you were so off? Well, it's because we don't know. And you have to tell people that it's a fluid situation. You have to make sure everybody understands the assumptions that are underlying this, and that we have to go back and reiterate and reforecast and go through the cycle again.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Brian. As I can see that our business partners, they have a lot of information, they know a lot of information, but they need our help to assess the risk, how to organize the data, how to ask the right question to get the proper insights from them, how to put it in a very good framework, same as the tool you mentioned, or the tool also we implemented in our organization. So they need someone to reorganize the data with them, ask them the right questions, and help them to quantify the risk.
Mohammed, there's a question in the chat room directed to you. One attendee wanted to know how he or she could quantify the checklists, right? How do you move from a register of risks to a financial output?
Yeah, actually, there are different perspectives in quantifying the risk. For example, if we have expecting decrease in market sales or the in market consumption, we're gonna we asked our commercial team to quantify how many lost patients they are expecting. If our patients are moving to another competitor, they have like a home care service or something like that. So they have to quantify the expected decrease in market sales, and based on that, we can quantify the revenue impact and accordingly the gross margin and the bottom line. This is from, for example, in market consumption. From pricing perspective as well, if you are planned, for example, or expecting price reduction in certain months, and because of the COVID-19, the price reduction decision has been moved for 3 months, so we have to quantify the expected sales for 3 months and multiply it by the expected price difference, and also we can quantify it. Also, in this tool, we put some good fields for the team. For example, is it in the plan or not? Sometimes we have risk, but it was not in our original plan. We have to make it also in quarter basis. Also, they have to put the probability. Is it high probability, medium, and low? And also, we can multiply the probability by the expected risk to expect exactly the amount. Do you have any other question?
One question that came in. Somebody wanted to know if any of us had considered a pandemic before COVID-19. I'll give a quick answer and then I'll pass it off in the last minute or two. At AFP, at our annual conference last fall, we had a session on risk scenarios and scenario planning. And Steve Player had asked the entire room as almost a workshop to write down their top 5 risks that they saw coming for the next year. And so there were about 200 people in the room, various tables, probably about 15 tables or so. And everybody wrote down what they thought, and he collected them and he typed them up. Out of this room of 200 financial forecasters, exactly 0 people had said pandemic was one of their top risks for the coming year.
But it won't be the case in the future. If you ask this question after a couple of years, people will consider it now, I guess. All
right. I do believe we're out of time and we're going to hear from Trent or Pat in a moment. There are a couple questions on Q&A, perhaps that we can record those and find a way to get back to those individuals.
That's great. Thank you very much. Big thank you to Mohammed, Brian, and Anand for that session. Let me thank you to all of you for joining us today and for raising over £39,000 for the NHS. A reminder that you can upgrade and please check your inbox for your email reminder about your next session, and that will be the link. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Mohammed. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.